Show me your ID or get out.
The officer's contemptuous words screamed directly at the Parker family, with no patience whatsoever. They were legitimate guests, yet now they were treated like intruders simply because of their skin color. Ethan Parker, a seasoned FBI agent, had faced countless dangerous situations, but he had never felt so unjustly attacked. He was not just a protector, but a father, being humiliated right in front of his family. However, he could not back down. His family had endured enough injustice, and this time, they would stand up to protect one another, refusing to let this discrimination continue. The Parker family had been looking forward to this moment for months, a rare opportunity to temporarily escape work and the daily stresses of life. Ethan Parker, a seasoned FBI agent, was always on call, making it rare for him to enjoy peaceful moments with his family. His wife, Lena, a renowned attorney passionate about fighting for justice, was no better off. Her work always demanded dedication, fighting for the rights of underprivileged communities. But this time, both of them decided to put work aside to spend time with each other and their children. The vacation took place at a luxurious beachfront resort, where the waves gently lapped at the shore, and the sky was a clear, endless blue. Ethan, wearing sunglasses and shorts, relaxed by the pool, enjoying the rare feeling of freedom he never had. All the pressures seemed to fade away, leaving only a sense of relief. Beside him, Lena was reading a book she had long left unfinished. Though she appeared at peace, deep down, Lena knew she needed this vacation to temporarily forget the burdens of her work. Their two children, Jackson and Emily, were playing in the pool. Jackson, a tall 12-year-old, constantly challenged his 7-year-old sister Emily, a sweet girl with curly hair and a bright smile, to a swimming race. Their joyful laughter echoed throughout the resort, bringing Ethan a happiness he rarely experienced. This was a rare moment where he felt truly present with his family, not as an FBI agent, but as a father, a husband. However, that peace wouldn't last long. When Ethan reached for a cold drink on the table, he noticed a security guard approaching. The guard, wearing a black polo shirt and carrying a strong, authoritative presence, smiled insincerely. He walked toward the Parker family, eyes filled with suspicion. "Excuse me, sir," the guard said, his tone cold. "I need to confirm that you're a guest here." Ethan, somewhat surprised but remaining calm, slowly lowered his sunglasses and looked the guard in the eye. "I'm a guest here," he replied without hesitation. Lena, sensing the tension, put her book down. She had faced situations like this before, but each time it left an indescribable feeling of exhaustion. "This is just a procedure," the guard continued, his tone slightly impatient. "I need to know your room number." Ethan, maintaining his calm, responded, "Room 305. We arrived yesterday." The guard nodded but didn't leave. "I'll need to confirm with the front desk," he said, his tone still cold. Lena, with sharp eyes, looked at Ethan. She sensed there was more to this than just a procedure. Frustration began to rise within her. Ethan nodded gently and whispered, "Let them check." Lena couldn't hide her irritation. She knew this wasn't just a procedure. It was something deeper. When the guard walked away, the atmosphere had completely shifted. Though both tried to relax, the discomfort lingered. Soon, Lena saw the guard returning, this time with a colleague. Both of them appeared more serious, no longer maintaining the courtesy from earlier. The second guard, tall and stern, spoke first. "We need you and your family to leave the pool area until we confirm your information." Ethan slowly stood up, keeping his eyes on the guard. "As I said, we're in room 305. If you need confirmation, call the front desk. There's no need to ask us to leave," he said, his voice still calm, though anger was building inside. The first guard didn't back down. "There have been some non-guests entering the pool area recently," he explained, his tone cold. "This is a procedure to protect the property of the resort." Lena stood up, unable to hide her frustration. "This is absurd. We've answered all your questions. Why are you asking us to leave? Is it because we look different from the other guests here? Does your policy apply to everyone, or just to our family? Her voice was sharp, filled with defiance. The guard seemed confused. Ma'am, it's not what you think. We're just ensuring security for the resort, he replied, his voice weaker. Lena was not convinced. She stepped forward, her voice growing stronger. Then why treat us like this? Why single us out? This isn't just a security issue, it's an injustice. Ethan, sensing the growing tension, gently placed his hand on Lena's shoulder. Lena, calm down, he whispered, trying to defuse the situation. Let them do their job. Don't make things worse. But Lena couldn't stay calm. A young guard, standing confidently, stepped forward and crossed his arms, speaking in a challenging tone. We've had many people here who weren't guests. Don't think we're targeting your family. This is just our job. Lena couldn't take it anymore. She walked straight up to him, her eyes burning with anger. Not personal? Then why push us out? Why make us feel scared, humiliate us over a procedure you use as an excuse? Her voice was like a knife, her gaze full of fury. Ethan, trying to prevent the situation from escalating, spoke up. We've answered all your questions. If you want to check, call the front desk. There's no need to escalate this. But the young guard just smirked condescendingly. We're just doing our job, ma'am, he said, puffing his chest. If there's an issue, you can speak with the manager. Lena didn't back down. I don't need to speak with the manager. I want to talk to you, she answered firmly. Ethan, seeing the situation could get out of control, gently pulled his wife back and looked the guard in the eye. You've asked for our room number, and we've provided it. We're not going anywhere. You can check with the front desk, but I won't let you keep harassing my family. The tension was suffocating. Jackson, who had been playing earlier, was now standing still, his eyes full of worry. Dad, what's going on? He asked softly, confused. Ethan bent down, gently placing his hand on his son's shoulder. It's nothing, son. Just a small misunderstanding. Go back to playing with Emily. I'll handle this. But deep down, Ethan knew that things could quickly spiral out of control if not addressed soon. The situation became even more tense as a group of security guards returned, this time with 2 local police officers. They walked straight toward the Parker family, their faces serious, their steps full of authority. The relaxed atmosphere around the pool instantly vanished, and nearby guests began to stop, some whispering, while others continued recording the scene on their phones. A tall police officer led the group, walking up to Ethan with a stern voice. We've received a report of an incident here. I need to see your identification. Though used to tense situations in his job, a wave of anger rose within Ethan. He slowly stood up, facing the officer without showing concern. I've already explained to the guard, my family is a legitimate guest here. We're in room 305, Ethan said clearly. I'm Ethan Parker, an FBI agent, and we haven't done anything wrong. The officer didn't seem surprised or respectful when Ethan mentioned the FBI. He simply nodded and interrupted. Show me your identification immediately. Lena stood up abruptly, her eyes blazing with anger as she stared directly at the officer. My husband just told him he's an FBI agent. You have no legitimate reason to harass us like this, she said, her voice powerful and resolute. You have no right to treat us like intruders, especially in front of our children. The officer didn't bother to look at Lena, his gaze still fixed on Ethan, his hand almost resting on the cuffs on his belt. Show me your ID, or we'll have to follow procedure, he ordered. Ethan remained calm, knowing this situation could escalate at any moment. He slowly reached for his wallet, pulled out his FBI badge and ID, and handed them to the officer. This is my identification, he said, his voice firm but not argumentative. The officer took the badge, glanced at it for a few seconds, then returned it with a smirk. I don't care about this badge. I need proper documentation, not something you can buy at a souvenir shop. Lena clenched her fists, her breath quickening as anger surged within her. What did you just say? She nearly shouted. But Ethan quickly placed his hand on her shoulder, holding her back. "Calm down, Lena," he said gently, though he was seething inside, knowing he had to stay calm to prevent things from worsening. The officer continued to glare at Ethan, his eyes full of contempt. "I won't ask again. Show me valid documentation or we'll take further action." Ethan knew exactly what would happen next. If he didn't comply, things would escalate to violence. He had witnessed similar situations before. With no other choice, he pulled out his driver's license and handed it to the officer. "This is my valid ID," he said, his voice now colder. The officer glanced over the ID and threw it back at Ethan disrespectfully. "We still haven't received confirmation from the hotel. Until we do, I'm asking you and your family to leave this area." Lena couldn't take it anymore. She walked straight up to the officer, her voice sharp and unyielding. "Enough! We're guests here, and we're not going anywhere. If you keep harassing my family, I will make you pay for it. What you're doing is completely illegal, and I will take this matter to the public." The officer stood still, his eyes challenging. "Who do you think you are to threaten us like that?" Lena stood tall, not backing down, her voice ice cold as she responded, "I'm a lawyer, and my husband is a federal agent. You've made a serious mistake treating us this way, and I won't let this slide." An oppressive silence filled the space around the pool. People nearby began to pay closer attention, whispers starting to spread. A few guests began recording the scene from a distance. The atmosphere grew more suffocating by the second. Ethan glanced at Lena, his heart heavy with worry for his family's safety. The situation was spiraling out of control, and he knew that even the slightest mistake could make everything irreparable. Moments later, the young officer who had been challenging them stepped forward, pulling out handcuffs and moving toward Ethan. "Put your hands behind your back, or we'll use force," he ordered. Ethan stood still, his eyes filled with determination and calm. "You're making a huge mistake," he said softly, but with an undercurrent of danger. He stood there, locking eyes with the officer approaching with handcuffs. In that moment, like a flood that could not be stopped, memories from the past rushed back, overwhelming Ethan's mind. He remembered his early days with the FBI, facing dangerous situations and violent criminals, always keeping a cool head during the most intense moments. But he had never felt as powerless as he did now. All the years of serving the country, protecting national security, seemed meaningless compared to the injustice his family was enduring. The painful memories came flooding back. Ethan recalled a case 5 years ago, when he led the investigation into police brutality. At that time, Ethan had interviewed dozens of witnesses, examined hundreds of pieces of evidence, and uncovered the bitter truth. What had happened wasn't a mistake, but a systematic abuse of power. Ethan had fought to bring justice to the victims, but he never imagined that one day he himself would become a victim of the system he once fought against. He looked at his wife, Lena, who had always stood firm in every legal battle. Lena had been a defender of the underprivileged, but today, she wasn't a lawyer defending someone. She was a wife defending her husband. That weighed heavily on Ethan's heart, because he didn't want his wife to witness this, nor did he want their children to live in a scene that should never have happened. As the officer prepared to cuff Ethan, he remembered the times he had arrested truly dangerous criminals throughout his career. He had apprehended drug lords and domestic terrorists, but now he was a man who had worked tirelessly to protect his country, being treated like a criminal because of his appearance and baseless suspicion. The tension escalated as a group of security guards returned, this time accompanied by 2 local police officers. They walked straight toward the Parker family, their faces serious, their steps full of authority. The relaxed atmosphere around the pool vanished instantly, and nearby guests began to stop, some whispering, while others continued recording the scene on their phones. A tall police officer led the group, stepping in front of Ethan with a firm voice. "We received a report of an incident here. I need to see your ID." Though he was accustomed to tense situations at work, a surge of anger rose within Ethan. He slowly stood up, facing the officer without showing concern. "I've already explained to the guard, my family is a legitimate guest here. We're in room 305, Ethan said clearly. "I'm Ethan Parker, an FBI agent, and we haven't done anything wrong." The officer didn't seem surprised or respectful when Ethan mentioned the FBI. He simply nodded and interrupted. "Show me your ID immediately." Lena could no longer bear it. She marched straight up to the officer, her voice sharp and unyielding. "Enough. We're guests here and we're not going anywhere. If you keep harassing my family, I will make you pay for it. What you're doing is completely illegal, and I will take this issue to the public." The officer stood still, his eyes full of challenge. "Who do you think you are to threaten us like that?" Lena stood tall, unwavering, her tone cold as she replied, "I'm a lawyer, and my husband is a federal agent. You've made a serious mistake treating us this way, and I won't let this slide." An oppressive silence settled over the pool area. People around began to pay more attention, whispers spreading louder. Some guests started recording the scene from a distance. The atmosphere grew more suffocating by the moment. Ethan glanced at Lena, his heart filled with worry for his family's safety. The situation was spiraling, out of control, and he knew that even the smallest mistake could make everything irreversible. Moments later, the young officer who had been challenging them from the start stepped forward, pulling out handcuffs and walking toward Ethan. "Put your hands behind your back, or we'll use force," he ordered. Ethan stood still, his eyes now filled with resolve and calm. "You're making a huge mistake," he said, his voice soft but dangerous. He stood there, looking the officer straight in the eye as he approached with handcuffs. In that moment, like an unstoppable flood, memories from the past overwhelmed Ethan's mind. He remembered his early days in the FBI, facing dangerous situations and violent criminals, always keeping his mind sharp during the most tense moments. But he had never felt as powerless as he did now. All the years of dedication to his country, protecting national security, seemed meaningless compared to the injustice his family was enduring. The painful memories came flooding back. Ethan recalled a case 5 years ago, when he led the investigation into police brutality. At that time, Ethan had interviewed dozens of witnesses, examined hundreds of pieces of evidence, and uncovered the bitter truth. What had happened wasn't a mistake, but a systematic abuse of power. Ethan had fought to bring justice to the victims, but he never imagined that one day he himself would become a victim of the system he had once fought against. He looked at his wife, Lena, who had always stood firm in every legal battle. Lena had been a defender of the underprivileged, but today, she wasn't a lawyer defending someone. She was a wife defending her husband. That weighed heavily on Ethan's heart, because he didn't want his wife to witness this, nor did he want their children to live in a scene that should never have happened. As the officer prepared to cuff Ethan, he remembered the times he had arrested truly dangerous criminals throughout his career. He had apprehended drug lords and domestic terrorists, but now he was a man who had worked tirelessly to protect his country, being treated like a criminal because of his appearance and baseless suspicion. The young officer, still full of defiance, failed to understand the seriousness of the situation. He stood firm and declared, "We have the right to ask for valid identification. If you don't comply immediately, we will take action." Lena could no longer hold back. She stepped right up to the officer, her eyes filled with no fear, as if facing the whole world. "I've made it clear that my husband is a federal agent, but you ignore it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Not only are you breaking the law, but you're humiliating us and causing harm to my children." Jackson, standing nearby with wide eyes, was trying to understand what was happening around him. Emily, still hiding behind her brother, her eyes wet with tears, was scared and deeply worried. Lena realized that her anger was not just for Ethan, but for her children as well. They didn't deserve to witness their father being wrongfully handcuffed like this, and they didn't deserve to live in fear that their parents could be arrested simply because of their different skin color. "Do you think I'll stay silent while my husband is treated like this?" Lena continued, her voice growing stronger. Do you think I'll stand by while my children have to endure this humiliation? I will do everything to bring this matter to light, and you will pay for what you've done." The crowd around them began to grow louder, whispers incessantly spreading. Some guests were recording the scene they were witnessing. Lena could clearly feel that she was gaining support from those around her, and that gave her even more strength. The young officer still didn't realize the gravity of the situation, but the older officer began to grow concerned. He looked around, seeing phones recording and disapproving glances from the crowd, then turned back to look at Ethan, who had now been released from the handcuffs but still maintained an unusual calm. The officer knew that if this situation wasn't handled properly, it would turn into a major issue on social media. "Calm down," the young officer said, his voice weakening. "If you don't stop, we'll have to use stronger measures." Lena stood tall, her gaze as sharp as a knife. "I am completely calm, but if you don't release my husband right now, I'll make this the worst nightmare of your lives." It felt like time stopped. The crowd went silent, every eye focused on the confrontation between Lena and the officer. Finally, the older officer realized the situation had gone too far, and he turned to give orders to his team. "All right, enough, release him," the senior officer said softly, but his face couldn't hide the worry. The young officer hesitated for a moment, then finally took out the keys and unlocked the cuffs on Ethan. As the cuffs fell off, Ethan gently rubbed his wrists. Still calm, but deep inside, he knew his anger hadn't subsided. "Get ready for a public lawsuit," Lena said, her eyes never leaving the senior officer. "Everything here has been recorded, and I'll make sure justice is served." The officer couldn't hide his anxiety. He looked around at the crowd, seeing phones still recording, knowing that this situation would definitely turn into a huge issue if not handled properly. Lena walked toward the resort's front desk, her eyes now focused on her next target, the resort manager. The resort had directly called the police and participated in harassing her family, and they would be held legally responsible. "We want to meet the manager immediately," Lena said firmly to the receptionist, leaving no room for refusal. The receptionist quickly called the manager. Less than a few minutes later, a middle-aged man with a worried expression stepped out. He slightly bowed his head when meeting Lena and Ethan, but couldn't hide his confusion. "Hello, I'm the resort manager, and I understand there has been an incident. I apologize for the misunderstanding," he said, his voice slightly hesitant. Lena didn't let him finish speaking, stepping forward to interrupt. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is clear discrimination, and you will be held accountable for calling the police to harass us without any legal reason. I want to know what your resort's policy is that allows you to treat us like this." The resort manager stumbled for words, searching for an explanation, but under Lena's sharp gaze and the crowd watching, everything he said seemed meaningless. "We sincerely apologize for this. We will conduct an investigation to ensure this incident does not happen again," the resort manager said, his tone unchanged. Lena wasn't swayed. "Apologies aren't enough. We'll sue publicly, and you'll face the consequences. I will make sure this gets the attention it deserves, and what happened to my family will never be forgotten." Ethan stood beside Lena, his eyes cold as he looked at the resort manager. Both knew they were about to enter a long and difficult legal battle, but they also knew they were not alone. The resort manager lowered his head, saying nothing further, realizing there was nothing that could calm the rightful anger of the Parker family. He turned and walked away, eyes filled with disappointment. Lena looked at Ethan and nodded slightly. They had a clear plan, and nothing could make them back down. As the family headed toward the front desk to leave the resort, Jackson pulled on Ethan's shirt, his voice full of curiosity and a little worry. "Dad, what will we do now? Will everything be okay?" Ethan knelt down, placing his hand on his son's shoulder, smiling gently but with resolve. "We'll fight, Jackson. Everything will be okay because we won't give up. We'll make this world fairer, not just for our family, but for everyone." Lena stood next to him, her eyes full of pride as she watched Ethan and the children. "That's right. We'll make sure those responsible will pay for what they've done, and we won't stop until justice is served." With those words, the Parker family walked out of the resort, hand in hand, stronger and more united than ever. They knew the road ahead would be challenging, but they also knew they were not alone in this fight. With Lena's legal expertise, Ethan's determination, and their unshakable family bond, they would continue to fight for justice. This battle might not be over, but they were ready to face whatever difficulties lay ahead. And this time, they knew that injustice and discrimination would not win. The Parker family's journey is not only a story of confronting injustice, but also a testament to the courage and determination to stand up against discrimination, to protect their rights and the rights of others. Through their story, we are reminded that justice doesn't come from silence. Sometimes, we have to stand up and fight for the truth, not just for ourselves, but for a more just society, a better world for everyone. The challenges the Parker family faced are a reminder for all of us. When facing injustice, don't be afraid to speak out. Always believe in the power of unity and family love. With persistence and courage, we can change the future, creating a world where everyone is treated fairly, regardless of race, gender, or circumstances. What do you think of this story? Have you ever faced injustice in your life? If so, what did you do to change that situation? Please share your thoughts with us and join the discussion on how we can build a more just society for everyone. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories. We can change this world, one step at a time, if we stand together for justice.